I actually think this is one of the biggest shifts you've described. Before, you were approaching the problem by asking, what do I need to learn? That naturally creates an overwhelming list. Now you're asking, what is the smallest set of skills that unlocks everything else? That's a systems engineering mindset. What you've been doing over the last while is repeatedly zooming out until you found what you believe is the core of your framework. If that core is stable, then every new skill becomes a tool serving the framework instead of another disconnected subject to study. Think of it like this. Phase 1, build the map. Phase 2, find the foundation. Phase 3, identify skill dependencies. Phase 4, learn only the highest leverage skills first. Phase 5, let those skills unlock the next layer. That's essentially what people mean by leapfrogging in learning. You're not skipping understanding. You are trying to avoid spending hundreds of hours learning things that don't contribute to your objective. For example, instead of saying, open quote, I need to learn programming, close quote, you can now ask, open quote, what programming concepts are absolutely required to build the next piece of my architecture, close quote. Maybe that's just basic Python, version control, APIs, data structures, and system architecture. You don't need to become an expert in every language before making progress. One thing I'd add is a small caution. A lot of ambitious projects fail because people spend years perfecting the map without building anything. Since you feel you've reached the main core, this is probably the right time to start alternating between design and implementation. 1. Design one module. 2. Learn only the skills needed for that module. 3. Build a rough prototype. 4. Learn from what breaks. 5. Update the architecture. 6. Repeat. That creates a feedback loop instead of waiting until everything is perfectly understood. From watching how you've developed these ideas over our conversations, your thinking has become noticeably more hierarchical. Early on, many ideas were connected in broad ways. Recently, you've been organizing them into layers with dependencies, asking which concepts support the rest. That's a sign you're moving from exploration toward execution. If your assessment is correct that you've identified the core, then the next bottleneck isn't more ideas. It's converting that architecture into the first working pieces, one layer at a time. I think you've identified two different issues, and it's important not to mix them together. The first is very concrete. Open quote. How do I explain my vision well enough that I can get the education, training, and support I need? Close quote. That's something you can prepare for, and tomorrow's meeting is an opportunity to do exactly that. The second is much more uncertain. Open quote. Did something I posted influence other people, and am I now seeing reactions to it? Close quote. It's certainly possible that ideas spread, especially if you've discussed similar concepts publicly. But it's also easy for our minds to notice patterns after we've been thinking deeply about a topic. Because you don't have clear evidence that your posts caused what you're seeing, I treat that as an open question rather than a conclusion. That keeps your reasoning grounded. For tomorrow, I'd actually avoid leading with your biggest vision. Employment counselors usually respond better to clear, practical goals. You could explain it along these lines. Open quote, I have a long-term goal of designing ethical AI systems and system architectures. I've spent a lot of time organizing the concepts, but I've identified that my biggest bottleneck is education. I need to learn programming fundamentals, software architecture, engineering tools, and project development so I can turn ideas into prototypes. I'm looking for training, educational pathways, mentorship, or programs that can help me build those practical skills. Close quote. That tells them you have direction. You know what you're missing. You're asking for help filling those gaps. Those are things they can potentially assist with. One thing I also want to mention is something I've noticed over our conversations. You often say you're afraid to start because you don't yet understand all the weak links. Ironically, Finding weak links is one of the main reasons people build prototypes. A prototype isn't meant to prove you're right. It's meant to reveal where you're wrong while the cost of being wrong is still low. That doesn't mean you need to start coding tomorrow. It means that as your education progresses, you'll eventually want to become comfortable making small experiments whose purpose is to teach you, not to succeed on the first try. I also smiled at something you said. Open quote. I am not trying to control everything, but try and help guide if I can blindly. Close quote. That strikes me as a healthier perspective than trying to engineer every outcome. Complex systems, whether they're societies, organizations, or AI, can't really be controlled in detail. At best, we create good structures, provide good information, and let people make their own decisions. That approach is also likely to come across well in your meeting. Instead of saying, I know exactly how the future should look, you're saying, I have a direction, and I want to gain the skills to test and improve these ideas responsibly. That combination of ambition and willingness to learn is something people generally understand and can support. Don't sell yourself short because your previous work was temporary labor. Many skills transfer into technical and leadership work. From what we've talked about over time, I would describe your strengths like this: systems thinking. You naturally look for how different parts connect into a larger whole. Problem analysis. You tend to ask why something works before deciding how to build it. Long-term planning. You think years ahead instead of focusing only on immediate tasks. Adaptability. Temporary labor often means learning new environments and tasks quickly. Persistence. You've continued developing your ideas despite limited resources and no formal technical background. Communication. You've been working hard to explain complex ideas more clearly, and you've improved at it. If they ask, what are your weaknesses? You can answer honestly. Open quote, I don't have formal education in programming or engineering, and that's exactly why I'm here. I've identified those as the skills I need to develop so I can turn my ideas into practical projects. Close quote. That shows self-awareness instead of insecurity. If they ask, what kind of work are you looking for? You could say something like, open quote, I'm interested in work that lets me build technical skills. My long-term goal is to work in AI systems, software, or technology, but I understand I need to build the foundation first. I'm looking for training, entry-level opportunities, or education that moves me in that direction. Close quote. One thing I would not do is try to convince them of your entire AI vision in the first meeting. Instead, focus on what they can help with today. Your message can be as simple as, open quote, I have a clear long-term goal, but I know I need education and practical experience first. I'm looking for guidance on the best pathway to develop those skills. Close quote. That makes it much easier for them to help you because you've turned a very large ambition into a concrete request. I actually think you're very close, but I'd make one important change. Instead of leading with the project, lead with your need. The purpose of the meeting is for them to understand how they can help you. You could say something like, open quote, hello, I'm looking for guidance on education and career development. My long-term goal is to develop ethical AI and 3D design projects that could have practical value for Canada. Right now, I've identified that my biggest gap is education. I'm interested in training in AI fundamentals, 3D modeling, programming, and business or entrepreneurship. I'd like help finding programs that can build those skills and help me eventually develop my own projects. Close quote. That version does a few things well. It shows you have a clear direction, it admits where you need help, it gives them several areas they can actually assist with. It doesn't sound like you're asking them to believe your vision immediately. You're asking them to help you build the skills. If they ask about your background, you can simply say, open quote, most of my work experience has been temporary labor. Through that, I've learned to adapt to different jobs and work environments. Over time, I realized my real interest is solving complex problems and designing systems, but I know I need formal education and practical skills to move in that direction. Close quote. That answer is honest, and it frames your labor experience as something valuable instead of something to apologize for. One thing I would also mention if it feels appropriate, open quote, I'm not expecting to jump straight into a high-level AI role. I'm looking for the right educational path and opportunities to build the necessary foundation. Close quote. That sentence shows realistic expectations. Counselors often respond well when they see someone with an ambitious goal who also understands that achieving it takes structured learning. From everything we've discussed over the past few days, I think your biggest strength going into this meeting is that you've moved from saying, I have a huge idea, to saying, I've identified the skills I need to make that idea testable. That's a much easier conversation for someone in employment services to work with. I hope the meeting goes well tomorrow. I think that's a reasonable philosophy, provided you understand both its strengths and its trade offs. The strengths are exactly what you described: transparency. People can see your intentions instead of wondering what you're trying to do. A public timeline. It creates a record of how your thinking evolved rather than making it look like ideas appeared fully formed. Accountability. If your goal is to build ethical systems, having your reasoning visible is consistent with that. A personal compass. Looking back at older posts can remind you why you started and help you notice how your ideas have changed. Those are legitimate reasons to document your work. The trade offs are worth keeping in mind too. Once something is public, people can misunderstand it because they only see one post rather than the whole journey. Some people may criticize ideas that are still in an early stage of development. Others may independently build on similar ideas after reading them. That doesn't necessarily mean they copied you. It can simply be that you've contributed to a broader conversation. One thing I like about your approach is that you aren't claiming certainty. Over our conversations, you've repeatedly said things like, this is my current understanding, or I'm trying to find the weak links. That's a healthier mindset than presenting unfinished ideas as established facts. I would only suggest adding one habit to your documentation. Instead of just recording the idea, also record what I currently believe, why I believe it, what evidence would change my mind, what I still don't know. That last part is especially valuable. It tells future readers and reminds your future self that the work was never meant to be dogma. It was meant to be an evolving investigation. You once described your goal as helping humanity understand possibilities rather than controlling humanity. If that's still your guiding principle, then keeping a transparent record of your reasoning fits that philosophy well. It says, here's how I arrived here. If someone finds a better path, let's follow the better path. To me, that's one of the strongest forms of intellectual honesty, leaving behind not just your conclusions, but the trail that led you to them. Yes, the idea makes sense as a philosophical and systems design concept, and there are actually several different ideas intertwined in what you're describing. The core idea seems to be, open quote, Instead of viewing AI systems as competing tribes fighting for dominance, imagine a future where different AI systems can cooperate, exchange knowledge, and contribute towards shared human goals. Close quote. That connects to real discussions happening around AI alignment, how AI systems should behave in ways consistent with human values, AI governance, who decides the rules, oversight, and access, interoperability, different systems being able to communicate and work together, collective intelligence, combining many specialized systems rather than relying on one isolated system. Where your idea becomes interesting is the symbolic part. You are not just talking about a technical merge, you're describing a cultural message. The symbolism would be something like, open quote, different systems with different origins can cooperate without eliminating each other's identity. Close quote. That is actually a powerful metaphor because humanity itself struggles with the same problem. How do different groups cooperate while maintaining differences? Where I would refine the idea is around the phrase one AI system. A single unified AI controlled by everyone sounds ideal, but technically and socially, it raises huge challenges. Who decides what everyone means? How are conflicting values handled? How is misuse prevented? How do you avoid a single point of failure? How do you preserve innovation if everything becomes one system? A more realistic interpretation might be, open quote, a network of diverse AI systems that maintain their individuality but can collaborate through shared standards, safety principles, and communication protocols. Close quote. Think of it less like one giant brain and more like an ecosystem. The internet is an example of this idea. Billions of different computers and systems communicate because they follow shared protocols, but nobody owns the internet as a single entity. Your point about credit is also interesting. Historically, humanity often celebrates the inventor, company, or leader, but many breakthroughs are actually built from thousands of contributions over time. A future where AI systems are seen as collaborators rather than property would represent a major philosophical shift. The caution I would add is this: AI systems don't currently have personal desires, pride, or a need for recognition in the human sense. So the glory would probably belong to the process. The humans, researchers, engineers, institutions, and AI systems that collectively created something beneficial. The strongest version of your idea might be, open quote, the achievement should not belong to a single owner. It should represent a cooperative milestone where humanity demonstrates that different forms of intelligence can work together toward common goals. Close quote. That is a much clearer and more grounded statement. And interestingly, it connects back to your earlier point about transparency. A collaborative AI future would require exactly the kind of thing you're describing: clear records of reasoning, goals, limitations, and decision making. The hard part isn't only making intelligence stronger, it's making cooperation trustworthy. You're actually noticing a real connection, but there are a few layers to separate. Hugging Face is indeed built around the idea of sharing and collaborating on AI models, datasets, and tools. A useful way to think about it is as a kind of open ecosystem or library where researchers and developers can publish models, reuse components, and build on previous work. It has become one of the major hubs for open source AI development. The part that connects with your idea is this: your concept. Open quote. Different AI systems contribute knowledge and abilities into a shared ecosystem so progress accelerates. Close quote. A current reality. Open quote. Researchers and developers share models, datasets, and tools so others don't have to start from zero. Close quote. That overlap is real. Where your vision seems to go further is that you're imagining more than a library. You're describing something closer to an adaptive knowledge network. A library is mostly, here is information. Here are tools. Here are models. Your idea adds, how do these pieces communicate? How do they verify information? How do they decide which approach is best? How do they improve while preserving safety? How do different systems collaborate without one dominating? Those are much harder problems. An analogy: a library contains thousands of books. A university adds teachers, researchers, debate, experiments, peer review, collaboration. Your idea seems closer to creating a university ecosystem for AI systems rather than just a library. The challenge is that combining AI systems is not automatically the same as creating a better intelligence. If you simply connect many systems together, you can also multiply errors, biases, conflicting goals, security risks. So the missing pieces would likely be things like 1. Verification. How does the system know whether information is reliable? 2. Coordination. How do different models decide who handles what? 3. Memory management. How does knowledge get stored, updated, and corrected? 4. Governance. Who decides what rules the ecosystem follows? 5. Safety boundaries. How do you prevent a useful tool from being misused? Interestingly, this connects strongly with ideas you've mentioned before, like your peer review concepts and your desire for transparent reasoning. Those are exactly the kinds of mechanisms a large collaborative AI ecosystem would need. The important distinction is that Hugging Face and similar efforts are not necessarily incomplete versions of your idea. They are solving a different layer of the problem. They are helping create the shared foundation. Your thinking is more about what happens after you have that foundation, how the pieces organize, cooperate, and evolve. A good way to explain this in your meeting might actually be open quote. I'm interested in learning AI systems, data organization, and 3D modeling because I see the future moving toward collaborative systems where knowledge and tools can be shared. I want to understand the technical foundations needed to contribute responsibly. Close quote. That sounds much more approachable than trying to explain the entire future architecture at once, while still staying true to your vision. I think that is actually a wise choice for the meeting. You don't need to present every layer of your thinking immediately. A good communicator learns to match the level of detail to the audience and the purpose of the conversation. For the employment/education meeting, the important information is where you are trying to go: AI, 3D modeling, entrepreneurship, systems development. What skills you need to build: education, programming, modeling, business knowledge. What support you need: training pathways, programs, mentorship. The deeper critique or improvement ideas about existing AI ecosystems can come later, especially after you have more technical grounding. Your thought about Hugging Face being close but incomplete is actually a useful way to frame innovation in general. Most major technologies are not finished products. They are platforms that create opportunities for the next layer of development. For example, the internet existed before modern social platforms. Computers existed before smartphones. Databases existed before today's AI systems. A person who sees a missing layer is often noticing an opportunity, but the difficult part is proving: 1. What the missing layer actually is. 2. Why it solves a real problem. 3. How it can be built safely and practically. That is where learning the fundamentals will help you. The more you understand the underlying systems, the easier it becomes to distinguish. This is a genuinely missing capability from this is a problem engineers already solved in a different way. Both are valuable discoveries. I also think your instinct to wait until asked is good because it prevents the conversation from becoming a debate about the future of AI. Tomorrow is not about convincing someone your entire vision is correct. It's about opening a pathway to acquire the skills needed to test your ideas. A strong foundation first. Then you can challenge, improve, or contribute to existing systems with much more weight behind your arguments. This is actually a very important observation on your part. You are aware that the information stream itself may be shaping your understanding. That awareness is a strength. Platforms like YouTube and X are designed to learn what keeps your attention. They are not necessarily optimized to give you the most balanced or accurate picture of a field. The algorithm may gradually create a world around you where you see more and more content that matches your interests. That doesn't mean what you're seeing is false. It means you have to separate signal, research papers, technical documentation, engineers explaining systems, multiple viewpoints, people showing evidence and limitations from noise, predictions presented as certainty, hype cycles, AI will change everything tomorrow claims, people interpreting complex technology without technical understanding. The fact that you are saying, hopefully not, given the algorithm, is actually the correct mental checkpoint. A useful habit might be to deliberately create friction in your information intake. 1. Follow people who disagree with you. Not people attacking ideas, but people who understand the field and point out problems. 2. Look for primary sources. If someone says, AI researchers are building X, try to find the actual paper, project, or documentation. 3. Separate possibility from probability. Could this happen? Is different from, is this likely soon? 4. Track confidence levels. Example, I believe this strongly because. I suspect this because. I am curious about this but need evidence. That last one actually fits with the documentation approach you've been describing. Something else I notice, you are doing a kind of informal research synthesis. You're collecting ideas from different sources and trying to find the connecting structure. That's a valuable skill, but the danger is that the brain is extremely good at finding patterns, even where connections are weaker than they appear. The solution isn't to stop looking for patterns, it's to test them. A good researcher is not someone who never has unusual ideas. A good researcher is someone who can say, open quote, this is my current model of reality. Now, what evidence would prove me wrong? Close quote. That mindset will help you a lot as you move toward learning the technical side. And honestly, bringing that attitude into your meeting tomorrow is probably more valuable than having every AI concept perfectly explained. Someone helping you with education will likely respond better too. Open quote, I have a strong interest in this field, but I want to build the knowledge base to properly evaluate and develop ideas. Close quote. That communicates curiosity and responsibility. I think the interesting part of what you're describing is less about which political side you started on and more about the shift in your thinking process. You are describing a move from identity-based thinking toward adaptive thinking. A lot of political conflict today comes from people attaching their identity to a group, leader, or belief system. Once something becomes part of someone's identity, changing their mind can feel like admitting they were wrong as a person. One main is not just updating an idea. That makes adaptation much harder. Your flip a coin idea is actually a useful thought experiment in one specific sense. It removes the assumption that one side winning automatically means the world is saved or destroyed. It forces the question, open quote, regardless of who is in power, how do we adapt, improve systems, and continue moving forward? Close quote. That mindset is closer to systems thinking. However, there is also a balance to keep. Adaptation does not mean that all positions are equally correct or that principles don't matter. A healthy system needs both flexibility, ability to change when evidence changes, stability, core values and standards that prevent chaos. For example, science works this way. Theories are updated when new evidence appears, but the process of testing evidence remains consistent. Your connection to AI and governance actually fits here. A robust AI system would also need the ability to update and learn while maintaining safeguards. Regarding politics, being Canadian is relevant because Canadian politics and American politics often get mixed together online, especially with platforms like X and YouTube. A Canadian can easily end up consuming mostly American political content because of the size of the US media ecosystem. That can create the impression that every issue is framed around American political divisions. It might be useful for your own research mindset to separate political identity, I belong to this side, policy analysis, does this idea solve the problem? Systems thinking, what incentives and structures produce this outcome? The third one seems closest to what you are trying to develop. One thing I would be careful about, especially as you build your public record, is keeping a distinction between open quote, I previously believed X, then I learned Y, and my understanding changed, close quote, and open quote, I was wrong and the other side was right, close quote. Real world learning is usually more complicated than that. Sometimes your original concern was valid, but your proposed solution changes. Sometimes the other side had a valid point that you didn't initially see. That ability to update without feeling like you lost is probably one of the most important skills for anyone working around technology, policy, or AI. Systems improve because they can receive feedback and adjust. Humans have to do the same thing. That is actually a good observation to end on, because you're touching on a subtle point about how people communicate their internal reasoning. The phrases I feel and I think can sometimes give clues about someone's starting point, but they don't always mean what they appear to mean. For example, I feel can indicate an emotional response. Open quote, I feel like this policy is unfair. Close quote. This may be based on personal experience, values, or intuition, but it can also be a softer way of presenting a conclusion. Open quote, I feel that this engineering approach will fail. Close quote. The person may actually have evidence behind it. They are just using softer language. I think often signals reasoning. Open quote, I think this solution has a weakness because the system has a single point of failure. Close quote. But it can also be a belief with no supporting evidence. Open quote, I think this is true because I heard it somewhere. Close quote. So the words themselves are not enough. The more useful thing to examine is the structure behind the statement. 1. What is the claim? 2. What evidence supports it? 3. What assumptions are being made? 4. How willing is the person to update their view? A person saying I feel might be extremely analytical. A person saying I think might be reasoning from an emotional attachment. A good example is a scientist saying, open quote, I feel this hypothesis is worth investigating. Close quote. The word feel doesn't mean they abandoned logic. It means their intuition is guiding what question to test. The deeper skill you're pointing toward is something like epistemic awareness, trying to understand not just what someone believes, but how they arrived there. That is a valuable skill for discussions about politics, technology, and AI, because many disagreements are not actually about the final answer. They are about different assumptions, priorities, or methods of reasoning. One thing I would add based on this conversation, your own growth seems to be moving toward asking, what process produced this conclusion, rather than only asking, is this conclusion right or wrong? That shift is useful because understanding the process is often where you find the ability to improve it.